A mail-order bride escaped a cruel husband, chased through the mountains until a cowboy found her. She had arrived full of hope, her heart beating with excitement and nerves. Coming from a small town far away, she had dreamed of a life that was bigger than anything she had ever known. When she first saw the advertisement for a mail-order marriage, it seemed like a promise. A promise of safety, love, and a chance to leave behind the limitations of her life. She imagined herself in a new home, somewhere peaceful, cared for, and valued. She packed her bags with careful precision, tucking away her favorite memories. A photograph of her mother, a locket she always wore, a small notebook filled with dreams and sketches of a future she hoped to build. The journey to her new home was long, filled with flights, trains, and dusty buses. She watched the landscape change outside the window and let herself feel the flutter of anticipation in her chest. Every mile brought her closer to a life she imagined as perfect, a life where someone would finally notice her worth, where she would feel safe and cherished. When she first arrived at the small, isolated town, her eyes took in the rolling hills and quiet streets. It was nothing like the bustling city she had grown up in, but there was a calmness to it that made her hope grow even more. She remembered the moment she first met him. He was taller than she expected, with broad shoulders and a serious face that seemed to carry years of experience. His smile was cautious but polite, and his words were gentle at first. He welcomed her warmly, speaking carefully as if he wanted to make a good impression. For a moment she felt relief. Perhaps this life would be everything she imagined. Perhaps this man would care for her and respect her. That night, she lay in the small bedroom he had prepared for her, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She whispered to herself that tomorrow would be the start of something beautiful. But reality began to creep in faster than she could prepare for. The man she had hoped to know as a kind and loving husband soon revealed a side that chilled her to the bone. At first, it was small things, a sharp tone when she asked a question, a frustrated sigh when she needed help. She told herself to ignore it, that it was just a misunderstanding. She reminded herself of the promise she had believed in. But over the days that followed, the kindness disappeared entirely. It was replaced by strict rules, angry words, and a constant watchfulness that made her feel trapped in her own home. Even simple acts like stepping outside to breathe fresh air or speaking to a neighbor became a challenge. She felt like she was living in a cage, her hopes slowly being crushed. The first time she realized the danger she was in, it was a quiet evening. She had prepared a small meal, hoping to please him, and he had snapped at her for something minor. How the bread was cut, or how the vegetables were arranged. She remembered the fear that shot through her like ice, realizing that this was no misunderstanding. She was alone in a strange country, married to someone who saw her not as a person, but as someone to control. Tears came easily, silently streaming down her face as she cleaned the kitchen. She had no one to talk to, no friend to confide in, and no family nearby. Every day, the walls of her life seemed to close in, and with them her hope began to fade. But she refused to give up completely. Deep inside, a spark of courage remained, refusing to die. She began to watch him carefully, noting the times when he left the house or seemed distracted. She memorized the patterns of the town, the winding paths that led out to the hills beyond. She studied the small map she kept tucked under her pillow, imagining the routes she might take to escape. Each night, she whispered to herself that she would find a way, that she would not let fear or cruelty define her. The thought of freedom became her guiding light, even as her daily life grew more unbearable. Her opportunity came unexpectedly. One morning, when he had gone out to meet a neighbor, she quietly packed a small bag with essentials, some clothes, a few personal items, and the little notebook she carried everywhere. She left behind anything that would weigh her down or slow her escape, including gifts he had given her that now felt like chains rather than tokens of affection. Her heart raced as she unlocked the back door and stepped into the cool morning air. For the first time in weeks, she felt the exhilarating taste of freedom, even though danger lurked nearby. Every rustle of leaves, every shadow made her pulse quicken, but she kept moving forward. She told herself that this moment, this escape, was her life or death. As she ran into the hills, she felt the physical strain of her journey immediately. Her legs ached from the climb, her lungs burned from the cold, sharp air, and her body shook from the adrenaline. Yet she pushed forward, driven by something stronger than fear. Hope. Hope that someone somewhere would help her. Hope that she could survive. The mountains stretched out before her, wild and untamed, filled with rocks, streams, and narrow paths that could either hide her or endanger her. She had to be careful, but she refused to let the thought of failure stop her. Every step was a test of her endurance, every stumble a reminder that she could not afford to give up. As the sun rose higher, casting long shadows over the hills, she found a small stream where she could rest briefly. She bent over, cupping cold water in her hands to drink, and felt a small wave of relief wash over her. The mountains were unforgiving, but they were also her shield. They hid her from view, creating a barrier between her and the life she was desperate to escape. She rested only briefly, knowing that her husband's men could be following her tracks at any moment. Every sound, the distant call of a bird, the crack of a branch, made her flinch, but she reminded herself that she had to keep moving. Stopping was not an option. Memories of her life before the marriage flashed through her mind. She thought of her family, the laughter and love of her childhood home, and the dreams she had once held so lightly. She thought of the life she had imagined when she first answered the mail-order advertisement, and the cruel irony that those dreams had led her into danger. Yet even in the midst of fear, she felt a quiet pride. She had made a choice to fight for herself, to take control of her life rather than remain a victim. Each step forward was an act of courage, a declaration that she would survive no matter the cost. As evening approached, the cold began to seep into her bones. She found a small ledge partially hidden by trees where she could huddle and catch her breath. Hunger gnawed at her, but she had only a few pieces of bread left, and she rationed them carefully. She whispered promises to herself, that she would make it through the night, that tomorrow would bring a new opportunity, that she would not be caught. The mountains were vast, and though they were dangerous, they offered a chance she could not find anywhere else. Her spirit, though shaken, remained unbroken. She had escaped the walls of her cruel husband's house, and that alone felt like victory. As darkness fell, she listened carefully for any sign of pursuit. The wind whistled through the trees, carrying with it the faintest sounds from the valley below. Every snap of a branch made her flinch, and every shadow seemed to move with intention. She kept her bag close, her eyes scanning constantly and her mind alert for any danger. Sleep was impossible, yet she forced herself to close her eyes briefly, imagining the day when she would finally be free of fear. In the quiet of the night, she felt a mixture of exhaustion and determination. She knew that the journey ahead would test her in ways she could not yet imagine, but she also knew she had taken the first, most important step. The night was long and cold, and the stars above seemed both distant and comforting. She thought about the life she wanted to build, the freedom she deserved, and the person she hoped to become. Each thought strengthened her resolve, reminding her why she had risked everything to escape. She was no longer just a mail-order bride trapped in a cruel home. She was a survivor, a woman determined to reclaim her life. The mountains around her were vast and wild, but they were also full of possibilities. She would navigate them carefully, one step at a time, until she found safety. By the first light of dawn, she had already moved further into the mountains, following the faint trails left by animals rather than humans. Every sound, every movement around her reminded her of the danger she had fled, yet also of the freedom she now carried. Her body ached, her spirit trembled, but she pressed on. She reminded herself that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act in spite of it. Each step she took was a testament to that courage. And deep inside, a quiet hope began to grow. Perhaps, just perhaps, she would find someone who could help her, someone who could guide her through this wilderness and protect her from those who sought to harm her. The mountains were vast, wild, and full of unseen dangers. Each step she took was a mix of relief and terror. The morning air was crisp, biting at her cheeks and filling her lungs with icy freshness. She had left her home, her husband, and the life that had trapped her behind, but now the reality of survival hit her. She was alone in a landscape that offered both freedom and danger. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a bird, the whisper of the wind, made her heart race. She knew she had to be careful, yet she could not stop moving. To stop meant to risk capture, and that was a risk she could not afford. The first challenge came almost immediately. A narrow path led along a steep cliff, the kind of path where one wrong step could send her tumbling down. Her legs shook with exhaustion, but she held tightly to the rocks, moving slowly and carefully. Each movement required all her strength and focus. Her heart pounded in her chest, not just from fear, but from the realization that she could not rely on anyone. There was no one to catch her if she fell, no one to guide her along the way. She whispered encouraging words to herself, reminding herself that she was strong enough to keep going. Every careful step was a victory, and each small victory gave her courage to continue. Hunger began to gnaw at her stomach. She had rationed her bread, but it was quickly disappearing. She looked around, hoping to find berries or roots that could sustain her, but the forest was unfamiliar. She did not know which plants were safe to eat, and she could not risk poisoning herself. Instead, she kept moving, telling herself that survival was more than just food. It was reaching a place where she could finally find help. Her mind wandered back to the life she had left behind. She thought of the dreams she had once held and the freedom she had fought so hard to reclaim. These thoughts strengthened her resolve, giving her the energy to climb higher and navigate the uneven terrain. As the hours passed, fatigue set in. Her muscles ached, her back burned from carrying her small bag, and her feet were raw from the rough ground. But she did not allow herself to stop for long. She found a small stream and bent down to drink the icy water, cupping it in her hands. The water was cold, but it revived her spirit. She splashed her face and tried to clear her mind, forcing herself to stay alert. She knew that she could not let her guard down. Somewhere behind her, her husband's men might be following, searching for any sign of her escape. The thought of being caught made her stomach tighten with fear, but it also reminded her why she had fled. She had no choice but to keep moving forward. The mountains were filled with obstacles she had not anticipated. Fallen trees blocked her path, streams swelled from recent rains, and rocks slid beneath her feet. She had to climb, crawl, and jump, using every ounce of energy she had. At one point, she stumbled and fell, scraping her hands and knees against the rough ground. Pain shot through her body, but she forced herself to stand. The thought of giving up never crossed her mind. She could not allow it. Each time she fell, she reminded herself that survival required persistence. Each bruise and cut was proof of her struggle, proof that she was doing everything she could to stay free. The weather grew colder as the day wore on. Clouds gathered overhead, and a chill wind swept through the trees. She pulled her coat tighter around her and pressed on, knowing that shelter was essential. She had to find a place to rest safely, but she could not risk a fire that might give away her location. The mountains were both her protector and her challenge. They hid her from her pursuers, yet they also tested her limits at every turn. She climbed higher, feeling the sting of cold in her fingers and toes, and reminded herself that the night could not stop her. She was determined to find a safe place before darkness fell. As she moved, she became more aware of her surroundings. Every sound of snapping branches, every sudden movement of leaves made her heart race. She had learned to move silently, to blend into the shadows, and to trust her instincts. There were times when she stopped completely, crouching behind a rock or tree, listening for signs of pursuit. She knew that her husband would not give up easily. He wanted her back, and he had the means to send people into the mountains after her. The thought of their pursuit made her quicken her pace, her fear fueling her determination. She had escaped once, and she would not let them take her back. Night fell slowly, and with it came new challenges. The temperature dropped sharply, and darkness made every step uncertain. She had to rely on memory and instinct, remembering the paths she had seen earlier in the day. Her eyes strained to see in the dim light, and her ears caught every small sound. The wind whispered through the trees, sometimes sounding like voices, but she forced herself to focus on the path ahead. Hunger and exhaustion pressed heavily upon her, but she refused to let them stop her. She reminded herself that each step forward was a step closer to freedom. The nights were the hardest. She huddled in small caves or behind large rocks, trying to keep warm. She wrapped herself in her coat, shivering as the cold seeped into her bones. Sometimes she cried quietly, overwhelmed by fear and loneliness. But even in those moments, she reminded herself of why she was running. She was running for her life, for her freedom, for the chance to rebuild a future she could control. Tears did not weaken her. They reminded her that she was human and that every feeling she had was a testament to her strength. She rested as best she could, knowing that sleep was a luxury she could barely afford. By the third day, she had learned to move with purpose. She avoided open areas, sticking to the thickest parts of the forest. She listened for distant voices, the sounds of people searching for her, and adjusted her path to avoid them. She had become a shadow, moving quietly and swiftly. Every decision was critical, choosing the right path, the safest hiding spots, and the fastest routes. She realized that the mountains, though dangerous, were her greatest ally. They provided cover, forced her pursuers to slow down, and allowed her a chance to survive. She clung to the thought that the mountains were on her side, and that each obstacle she overcame made her stronger. Food became a constant worry. She had only a few small pieces of bread left and had no choice but to hunt and forage carefully. She found wild plants that she could recognize, berries that were safe to eat, and sometimes small fish in the streams. Each meal was minimal, but it sustained her enough to keep going. Her body grew weaker, but her determination never faltered. She reminded herself that survival was not just about physical strength. It was about courage, patience, and ingenuity. She had survived so far, and she refused to let hunger or exhaustion defeat her. Her mind often wandered to thoughts of help. She imagined finding someone, a local, a passerby, or a stranger, who would see her struggle and offer assistance. She dreamed of a safe cabin, a warm fire, and someone who could protect her from her pursuers. These thoughts gave her hope, keeping her spirits alive even when her body ached. She repeated these thoughts like a mantra: "Someone will help me. I will not be caught. I will survive." The mountains could be cruel, but they could also lead her to safety if she kept moving and stayed vigilant. By the fourth day, she felt the toll of her journey in every part of her body. Her legs were sore, her hands raw, her lips chapped, and her stomach empty. Yet she pressed on, knowing that stopping meant danger. She had to find shelter, food, and safety before the next night fell. The sounds of pursuit were ever present in her mind. She imagined her husband's men moving through the forest, searching for her every step of the way. Fear surged through her veins, but it also sharpened her senses. Every shadow was watched, every sound analyzed, every movement calculated. She was determined not to make a mistake. The mountains seemed endless, but slowly she began to recognize small landmarks: an unusual rock formation, a fallen tree in a narrow path, a stream bending in a particular direction. These signs gave her confidence and a sense of direction. She started to plan her route more carefully, choosing paths that offered cover and made it harder for anyone to follow. Each decision required careful thought, but she had grown more skilled with each passing day. She knew that the mountains were testing her, pushing her to her limits, and she accepted the challenge. She could survive this, she told herself. She would reach safety. As night fell once again, she found a small clearing where she could rest temporarily. She wrapped herself in her coat, huddled against a tree, and closed her eyes. Sleep came in short bursts, interrupted by dreams of being caught and memories of the cruel husband she had escaped. Yet even in her restless sleep, her mind worked on plans, strategies, and escape routes. She had learned that survival required constant attention and alertness. The mountains were unforgiving, but she was learning to navigate them. Each day, each obstacle, each fear she faced made her stronger and more determined to survive. She had been running for days, and the mountains had tested every part of her strength. Her body ached, her feet were raw, and her hands bore scratches from the rough terrain. Each night she found a small place to rest, hidden among rocks and trees, but sleep was never deep or peaceful. Every sound made her startle, every rustle of leaves made her heart race. She knew that somewhere behind her, her husband's men could be following. She could almost feel their presence in the forest, a shadow she could not see but could sense. Fear had become a constant companion, but she refused to let it stop her. She had survived this long, and she was determined to survive until the end. On the fourth day of her flight, she reached a particularly steep part of the mountains. The path was narrow, and one misstep could have meant a fall into the rocks below. She moved slowly, careful not to trip or lose her balance. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps, and her legs shook with exhaustion. Yet she pressed forward, knowing that stopping could mean danger. She kept her eyes on the path, her senses alert to every sound around her. She had learned to listen carefully, the distant call of birds, the wind in the trees, even the faintest snapping of a twig. Every sound could be a warning, and every step required vigilance. She moved like a shadow, blending into the forest as best she could. Suddenly she heard a sound that made her freeze in place. At first, she could not identify it, but then she realized it was not the sound of her pursuers. It was steady, deliberate, and calm, a different kind of presence in the wilderness. She crouched behind a rock, her heart racing, and peered cautiously in the direction of the sound. Through the trees, she saw a man moving with ease along the path. He was tall, strong, and confident, carrying himself like someone who knew the mountains intimately. He did not seem to be searching for anyone. Instead, he moved with purpose as if he had come to these mountains often. Something about him gave her a strange sense of safety, though she did not know why. Could she risk approaching a stranger? She watched him carefully for a few moments, trying to decide whether it was safe. Her instinct told her to hide, but her body was weak, and she could not continue much further without help. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that she had no other choice. She stepped cautiously into the open, waving slightly to get his attention. The man stopped immediately, his eyes sharp and observant. He saw her, studied her carefully, and then approached slowly, his movements deliberate but calm. There was no aggression in him, only curiosity and a quiet strength that made her feel a flicker of hope. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice steady but gentle. She could hear concern in it, and it made her feel a little less afraid. She nodded, though her body shook from exhaustion and fear. I've been running," she whispered. She could not tell him everything, not yet, but she hoped he would understand that she needed help. The man looked at her carefully, noting her dirty clothes, the scratches on her hands and legs, and the weariness in her eyes. He did not ask many questions. Instead, he offered his hand and said, "You can rest with me, you're safe here." Relief washed over her like a wave. She had survived the mountains this far, but now, for the first time, she felt that someone might be able to protect her. She followed him to a small clearing where he had set up a temporary shelter, a linta made of branches and leaves, hidden from view. He offered her water from a small canteen and some bread he had brought. She drank eagerly, feeling strength returning to her body with every sip. The presence of someone kind, someone willing to help her, made her feel a spark of hope she had not felt in days. As she ate, the man sat across from her, giving her space but watching carefully. She could tell he was experienced in the mountains. His movements were confident, his eyes alert to everything around them. He did not ask many questions, respecting the fact that she might not be ready to speak. Instead, he provided warmth, food, and the reassurance that she was not alone. For the first time since her escape, she allowed herself to relax slightly, though caution remained. She knew that her husband's men could still be searching, and the mountains could hide dangers other than the cold and hunger. She was exhausted but not reckless, and the man seemed to understand that. Later, as she rested, she began to speak in fragments, explaining that she had come from far away and that she was running from someone dangerous. She did not name her husband, fearing that he might find her through her words. The man listened patiently, nodding occasionally, offering small words of encouragement. He did not interrupt, did not judge, and did not rush her. His calm presence was comforting, and she felt that perhaps she had found a safe place, at least for the moment. Every story she told, even in pieces, lightened the burden she carried inside. She realized that sharing her experience, even partially, was healing. As the sun began to set, the man spoke quietly. "You can stay here tonight. I'll keep watch. Tomorrow we can plan a way to get you to safety." She nodded, grateful for his words. The night was still dangerous, but his presence gave her courage. She knew she could not rely solely on him. She had to be careful and alert. Yet for the first time in days, she felt that she was not completely alone. She curled into her coat, trying to sleep while he kept watch. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the faint sound of distant movement, but she trusted that he would notice anything approaching. Sleep came slowly in short bursts, but it was better than the restless nights she had spent alone. The next morning, the man offered her more food and some warm tea. She accepted, grateful for the nourishment and the comfort of his presence. He began to ask gentle questions, learning about her journey and her struggles without pressing her too hard. She told him small details, how she had traveled, the dangers she had faced, the fear she had felt. Each word made her feel stronger, as if speaking aloud gave her courage. He listened carefully, never judging, always understanding. She realized that she could trust him, though she still remained cautious. Her journey was far from over, and she had to remain vigilant. As the day wore on, they began to plan her next steps. The man explained that the mountains could be dangerous at night, and that she needed to move carefully to avoid being discovered. He suggested routes that were hidden and less traveled, paths that would give her the best chance of escaping her pursuers. She listened intently, grateful for his knowledge and guidance. Together, they studied the terrain, noting landmarks, streams, and potential hiding spots. For the first time, she felt that she had a real chance to survive and reach safety. She realized that this man, this stranger who had found her in the wilderness, was not just a helper but a protector. As they moved deeper into the mountains, the danger of being discovered remained. They were constantly alert, listening for the sounds of pursuit, watching for signs of anyone following them. She had learned to move silently, to blend into the shadows, and to trust her instincts. The man taught her small skills, how to read the land, how to move carefully, and how to stay hidden. She absorbed everything eagerly, understanding that knowledge could be as valuable as strength. Every lesson, every tip made her more confident and capable. She was no longer just running, she was surviving, learning, and preparing for the next step. Despite the dangers, moments of calm occurred. They found small clearings where they could rest, drink from streams, and catch their breath. The man shared stories of the mountains, of the people who lived there, and of the skills needed to survive in the wilderness. She listened with fascination, realizing that the mountains, which had once seemed so frightening, could also be a place of learning and discovery. The bond between them grew slowly, built on trust, respect, and the shared goal of keeping her safe. For the first time, she felt that she was not completely alone in the world. Someone cared enough to protect her, and that gave her hope. Days passed in this way, careful movement, constant vigilance, short rests, and cautious planning. She grew stronger both physically and mentally. Her fear remained, but it was balanced by determination and hope. The man had become her guide, her protector, and her quiet source of comfort. She realized that survival was not just about escaping her pursuers. It was about learning to trust again, to rely on someone without losing her independence. The mountains had tested her endurance, and now they were teaching her resilience. Every obstacle she overcame, every moment of danger she navigated, made her stronger and more capable. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the peaks, they found a hidden spot to rest. The man had chosen a location shielded by rocks and trees, a place where they could remain unseen from a distance. He offered her food and water, and they sat quietly, watching the stars appear in the sky. She felt a sense of calm she had not experienced since before her escape. The journey had been terrifying, exhausting, and lonely, but now she could see a path forward. She realized that survival was possible, that freedom was within reach, and that hope could still exist even in the darkest moments. The mountains had tested her in every way possible, physically, emotionally, and mentally. But now she finally felt a glimmer of hope. With the cowboy by her side, she began to see that survival was not only possible, but that freedom could truly be hers. The first days after he found her had been filled with exhaustion, fear, and caution. Every step had required careful planning, every movement had to be quiet, and every night she had to rest lightly, aware that danger could still be near. But now the immediate threat seemed to be behind them, and she could finally allow herself to breathe a little easier. They moved carefully through the mountain trails, avoiding the main paths and following streams that could provide water and guidance. The cowboy taught her how to recognize the safest routes, how to spot signs of anyone following, and how to use the terrain to her advantage. She learned to read the forest in a way she had never imagined possible. Every branch, every rock, every stream became a clue, a tool for survival. She listened intently, absorbing every word and gesture. Her confidence grew with each step, as did her sense that she could truly escape the danger that had shadowed her life for so long. Despite the exhaustion and fear, moments of calm appeared along the journey. They would find small clearings where they could rest, eat, and drink from the mountain streams. The cowboy often spoke softly, sharing knowledge of the mountains, stories of survival, and practical tips she could use if she were alone. She listened, grateful for both the guidance and the gentle presence. For the first time since she had escaped, she felt a sense of trust and safety. It was strange to think that someone she had never met before could become her protector. Yet in these wild, unforgiving mountains, he had proven himself to be exactly that. At night they made camp in hidden spots, using natural cover to remain unseen. The nights were still cold and sometimes frightening, but she learned to rest with confidence, knowing that he was alert, keeping watch. The fear that had gripped her since her first days in the mountains slowly softened. She allowed herself to think beyond mere survival, imagining the life she could build once she reached safety. The thought gave her a quiet strength, a determination that carried her forward even when the path was steep or treacherous. Each day brought them closer to freedom, and with it, a sense of purpose she had not felt in months. As they moved closer to the edge of the mountains, the cowboy suggested they find help from local authorities. She had hesitated at first, fearful that anyone she contacted might be connected to her husband or might not believe her story. But he reassured her gently, explaining that the authorities could offer protection, legal support, and a chance to finally put her fears behind her. She realized he was right. Staying hidden forever was not a solution. She needed help to ensure that her husband could not find her again, and she needed legal protection to reclaim her life fully. The thought of having someone officially on her side gave her hope she had not dared to feel before. When they reached a small town at the base of the mountains, the cowboy guided her to a local sheriff who specialized in cases like hers. The woman spoke cautiously at first, telling her story piece by piece, but the sheriff listened attentively and with concern. He assured her that she would be protected and that her husband would face consequences if he tried to harm her. Relief washed over her as she realized that the nightmare she had endured for so long was finally coming to an end. For the first time in months, she felt that she could finally live without constant fear. The legal protection gave her not just safety, but also a sense of dignity and empowerment she had almost forgotten. With the authorities involved, she was able to secure a temporary place to stay, safe from her husband's reach. She slept in a small cabin, warm and comfortable, something she had not experienced since her arrival in the new country. The simple comforts, a bed, a warm meal, and quiet, felt luxurious compared to the harsh wilderness she had navigated. She allowed herself to relax, even cry, acknowledging the fear and pain she had endured. The cowboy remained nearby, offering quiet support and ensuring that she felt safe. His presence was steady and comforting, reminding her that she was not alone in this new chapter of her life. Over the following days, she began to rebuild herself, both physically and emotionally. She washed the dirt and sweat from her journey, treated the scratches and bruises that still lingered, and rested as much as she could. She started to feel the weight of exhaustion lifting, replaced by a quiet strength. Every day she felt more capable, more in control of her own life. The mountains had forced her to fight for survival, and now, with safety established, she could focus on healing and moving forward. The courage she had discovered within herself during her escape became a foundation for a life she was determined to build anew. As the days passed, she grew closer to the cowboy. Their bond was built on trust, respect, and shared experience rather than words. He had protected her without expecting anything in return, and she had come to rely on his guidance and presence. They spoke occasionally, sharing small details of their lives and thoughts, but much of their connection was quiet and unspoken. She realized that she could trust him completely, and that trust felt like a bridge from the life she had endured to the life she was beginning to imagine. For the first time in months, she felt the comfort of companionship and understanding. Eventually, the legal process moved forward. Her husband was located and legally restrained from approaching her. She was granted protection and guidance on how to live safely, away from his reach. This news brought an overwhelming sense of relief. She could finally breathe freely, walk without fear, and make plans for her future. The months of terror, running, and hiding had finally given way to a possibility of normalcy. She felt empowered, knowing that the law was on her side, and that she could live her life without constant fear of being pursued. With her safety secured, she began to think about her life beyond survival. She dreamed of work, friendships, and stability, a life filled with choices she could make for herself. The mountains, which had once been a place of fear and challenge, had become a symbol of strength and resilience. Every step she had taken, every obstacle she had overcome, and every moment of courage had shaped her into a stronger, more capable person. She realized that her journey through fear had not only saved her life, but had also prepared her to embrace life fully, without hesitation. The cowboy remained a steady presence, guiding her when necessary but also allowing her independence. Their relationship was rooted in trust and respect, not obligation or expectation. He did not rush her, did not pressure her, and did not demand anything in return. He had helped her survive the mountains, and now he offered support as she transitioned into safety and stability. She appreciated his quiet strength and the reassurance of knowing that someone had her back, someone who valued her autonomy and courage. Together, they navigated the final challenges of her journey, moving forward with care and careful planning. Finally, the day came when she could look out over the mountains and feel truly free. She stood at the edge of a clearing, the sun warming her face, and realized that she had survived an ordeal that would have broken many people. She had faced fear, danger, exhaustion, and cruelty, yet she had not surrendered. She had escaped, navigated the mountains, and found someone willing to protect and guide her. Now, she could finally imagine a life without constant fear, a life where she could make choices, pursue dreams, and build a future. The mountains behind her had shaped her, but they did not define her. With the cowboy standing beside her, she felt a sense of peace she had not known in months. She did not rely on him to create her future. He was simply a companion in her journey, someone who had helped her reach this moment. She realized that freedom was not just about escaping danger. It was about reclaiming her life, making her own choices, and embracing the strength she had discovered within herself. The mountains had tested her, but they had also shown her resilience, courage, and the power of hope. In the days that followed, she began to make plans for the life she wanted. She looked for a place to live, considered work she could pursue, and began to dream of stability and comfort. She was no longer running from danger. She was running toward possibilities. Every day, she felt more empowered, more confident, and more alive. The journey through fear and uncertainty had given her perspective, strength, and determination. She knew that life would still have challenges, but she also knew that she was capable of overcoming them. Looking back, she realized how far she had come. From a hopeful young woman who had answered an advertisement for a mail-order marriage, she had faced unimaginable cruelty, fled for her life, survived the wilderness, and found a protector who had guided her to safety. She had endured fear, hunger, exhaustion, and danger, yet she had emerged stronger, wiser, and free. The mountains had tested her, but they had also helped her discover her courage, resilience, and hope. She understood now that survival was not just about escaping danger. It was about reclaiming one's life, finding strength within, and embracing the possibility of happiness once again. Standing in the sunlit clearing, feeling the warmth on her face and the solid earth beneath her feet, she knew that her journey was far from over, but it was hers to shape. With freedom secured, legal protection in place, and a future that she could build for herself, she took a deep breath and let the fear slip away. The mountains behind her had been terrifying, challenging, and exhausting, but they had also led her to life, hope, and a chance to start anew.